Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I'm just so thankful for tonight. Thankful for this group that you've assembled. And Lord, that we just get to come together right now as a body believers and just worship you in message, in discussion, in our community. Lord, we're just so grateful that you've given us this time tonight to get to point each other to Christ, just to get to strengthen our marriages, just to learn and grow from one another. So Lord, I just pray right now for our group. I pray for all that have taken time out of their Monday evenings to join us right now to do just that. So Lord, I thank you for them. Thank you for their hearts, their courage, and their willingness to improve their marriage. So Lord, just be with us tonight and just guide our conversations. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, guys. Well, I'm going to kick us off. So, as you guys know, we are Andy and Brooke Johnson. Tonight, we will be talking about a topic that is often something we are very unaware of, and at other times, it is all that we are aware of, and that is the topic of expectations.
So personally, it is often hard for me to fully understand a topic if I don't know the true meaning of the word. So let's first define what an expectation is. And if you're taking notes tonight, please feel free to write any of this down. An expectation is a strong belief that something should happen. So an expectation is a strong belief that something should happen. Brad Bigney illustrates in this chart shown here that comes from the book Gospel Treason that our I wishes of something that we desire morphs into a demand of I will have this happen, that morphs into a I must, which is a need now for it to happen. And that turns into an expectation of, okay, you should make that happen. So often our desires morph into a demand that morphs into a need that morphs into an expectation. And when our needs form, we begin to have expectations and demand our spouse to meet our expectations. And as you can see on the chart, when our expectations go unmet, our disappointments spiral down into us punishing the spouse expectation. And our expectations are what we believe should really come out in our parent relationships. This is partly why Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7:28, if you marry, you will have troubles in this life. Can I get an amen? Expectations are why we need to know about conflict resolution, good communication, and most importantly, Jesus. Because when we all have different expectations, and especially the ones that often go unmet, they are the beginning of our conflict.
So here's an example. You expect, or as Brooke said, know what is about to happen when your husbands, as you husbands come in from work after a long day, and you already play this scenario out in your mind of your beautiful wife greeting you with a kiss and suppers on the table and a big thank you for working and providing for her all day. And by now and over time, your wish for that has turned into an I should get that from her. I need that after how hard I work. I deserve it.
And you might expect or know what should happen when your husband comes in from work and he comes to your rescue saying, hey, let me help you with the kids or dinner. I know you've had a long day. I will prepare supper while you go relax. Over time, that seed of, oh, I wish he would do that when he walks in the door, now it's a full-blown, okay, I should have this, and if I don't, he will pay.
Neither one of our expectations are wrong, and so let me repeat that again. Expectations are not always wrong to have, but whoever does not get what they think will happen, how will that spouse respond? In this scenario, I doubt neither spouse will get what they expect. And then what? Will the spouse's unmet needs turn into punishment for the other spouse? This happens so often in marriages, and then these unmet expectations create distance between two spouses. Why do we expect these things? And most importantly, why don't we communicate these things with each other? This scenario may not seem like a big deal, but these mundane moments lead to a big moment of, I can't take this anymore. I want a divorce. You don't care about me. So let me give you this question. What in your life have you believed needed to happen and it has not turned out as you expected? You may have expected your husband to be a handyman, and he is not. You may have expected your wife to be the best cook or an amazing housekeeper like your mother, and she burns the biscuits every time, and your house is always a disaster. You may have thought you would never be divorced, and you're on your third marriage, and you think you need to be perfect to stand in God's grace, and you daily punish yourself. You may have expected to have a house full of kids to be truly happy, and one spouse was unable to have children. You may have expected your marriage to be thriving right now, and you are more lonely now than ever. You may have expected or needed your spouse to put in the work like you have at re-engage to stay married, and they haven't. So there are thousands of examples of what our expectations are, and it is so important for each of us to know in our own mind what we expect. Tonight, we will explain three things: where these expectations come from, what happens when our expectations are unmet, and lastly, how to manage our expectations in a biblical way.
So I want to start off by reading this poem titled Welcome to Holland by Emily Kingsley that completely changed my view on expectations. So listen closely, because we will be referencing this poem throughout our talk tonight. It begins, when you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous vacation trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks and you make your wonderful plans, the Colosseum, the Michelangelo David, the gondolas in Venice. You may learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. And after months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean Holland? I signed up for Italy, and I'm supposed to be in Italy, and all my life I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to a horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy new guidebooks, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you would never met. It's just a different place. It's a slower pace than Italy, less flashy than Italy. But after you've been there for a while and you catch your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills, and Holland has tulips, and Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they've had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yeah, that's where I was supposed to go, and that's what I had planned. And the pain of that may never, ever, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very, very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, very lovely things about Holland. So Andy and I personally were excited when we had our second child. I had all the expectations or the belief this will happen of our two boys running around in the yard, playing tackle football together, both being smart, athletic boys imitating their father. That was my Italy. Italy was really what I thought I needed to be complete. But there came a day that changed the course of our life, one we will never forget, was when we received a phone call from a neurologist who told us our baby boy had a chromosome disorder and do not expect him to walk, talk, or grow. That was the day the flight attendant told us we were in Holland. But haven't most of us expected Italy and got Holland at some point in our life? It may have not been that extreme as a special needs child, but at some mundane moment, you expected one thing and received another. The way we already produce the future in our mind sets us up for some unexpected emotions when God's plan is given to us, right? And I also expected Andy to respond to the situation as I did of arriving in Holland and not Italy. And he did not. That caused a major breakdown in our marriage. The way we respond to unmet expectations may look different, but have the same detrimental effect. Andy responded by withdrawing into another world of pretending he was in Italy when we were in Holland. And I used my frustration to pursue fixing my son on my own and finding my way back to Italy on my own, leaving my husband in Holland. We did not communicate at all and just went in different directions.
So we asked the question, where do our expectations come from? Why do we want what we want? And there are four sources we want to cover tonight: family of origin, friends, media, and other relationships. So first, let's talk about family of origin. Our family puts expectations on us, and we feel the need to meet their expectations. Why do we have so many in-law jokes or parent jokes? Or on the flip side, Maybe our mom and dad is perfect in our eyes, and we need our spouse to be just like them to be happy. What expectations has your family placed on you or your spouse? Secondly, friends. So we look at our friends and what they have, and we so easily fall into the trap of thinking our life should be just like theirs, or, depending on the friend, not be like theirs at all. Or maybe our friends' influence of how we should be gets in our minds, and then we expect that of ourselves or out of fear of man. Think of all the advice you've received from one of your buddies or your best friends. Is it really biblical? Third is media. We've all heard about the two kids and the white picket fence, right? The American dream. You know, ladies, the Prince Charming sweeping you off your feet. But here's a warning. Be very aware of your thoughts when you watch television or listen to music or read the top 10 ways a man should treat his wife. The phrase, do what makes you happy or feel good, screams very loudly from our TVs, phones, and radios. What media sources are you meditating on that contradict God's word? Those sources are trying to tell you what you need to be happy, that you deserve to be happy. Fourthly, let's talk about past relationships. Maybe we've been hurt by a past boyfriend or girlfriend or even a past spouse. We expect our spouse to be completely opposite of those past relationships. And when they are just like that person, that hurts us. Now, what do we expect? Probably the same outcome. So when we create in our mind how our life should look, that sets us up with unmet expectations.
So that leads us to the question of what are unmet expectations and how do we usually respond to them? So obviously, an unmet expectation is when what we think we should happen does not happen. This is arriving in Holland when you so desperately wanted Italy. Remember the chart that was shown earlier. Unmet expectations, what we think is going to happen or should happen does not happen, will lead to feelings of sadness, disappointment, frustration, and anger. So are you sad? Are you disappointed? Frustrated? Angry? Examine if you experience these emotions, if it could possibly stem from an unmet expectation, that something you thought was going to happen did not. So when you get off the plane in Holland, it wasn't the expectation of Italy that is the problem, because that expectation is not sinful or wrong to have in most cases. It's not sinful to want to go to Italy, and the outcome most of the time is not sinful. It's not sinful that you're in Holland. What is sinful most of the time is how we personally respond to arriving in Holland and not Italy. Are we frustrated, sad, angry? When we get off the plane and let everyone around us know in a poor way of communicating and seeking out to punish them. Remember the ways we ineffectively communicate from our re-engaged communication teaching. When you get off the plane or do not get what you think you should have, do you invalidate by demeaning those around you? Or do you withdraw and give everyone the silent treatment, which is a form of abuse or punishment as well? Because abuse is manipulating a person to get what you want. Or escalating by yelling at everyone or even physical abuse. Or negatively interpreting everyone's motive around you, thinking that someone was out to get you or keep you from getting what you want. These are all ways of responding that are sinful or punishing those around us because our expectation wasn't met, whatever the expectation may be. So all of us have experienced unmet expectations, right, at some point in marriage. And how we handle unmet expectations is everything. So James 4:1 says, what causes the fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from the desires that battle within you? You see that this desire turns into a full-blown I should have. If your desire is so strong that it tempts you to sin to get it, or sin if you think you will lose it, there's where the problem lies. We have all had strong desires of wanting what we want or tell ourselves what we need, right? Brad Bigney says, we do what we do because we want what we want. And we want what we want because we think what we think. And we think what we think because we believe what we believe. We have to get to what we truly believe about God that is enabling our thought process and driving our expectations and how we respond. We need to know our desires do not have to control us. That feeling of an unmet expectation that you feel is like a temperature gauge. Feelings let us know something's not right. Feelings are not something we have to respond to. You can see on this chart, do you respond to please your flesh or please God? You can choose to be feelings and emotion-based oriented, or you can be truth and Bible-based oriented when things do not go your way. You have a choice with your actions. Do we obey our feelings or do we obey God's word? So let me give you an example. So when we went to counseling, one thing Andy said that made me realize how much we lacked communicating was when he told the counselor, we just don't laugh anymore. And I remember that made me go silent in that counseling room. And I still remember looking at him in shock. I had no idea that that was important to him, that he expected us to joke around like we did before our kids. It made him angry at me because I had become so serious. It was an unmet expectation that was produced from a lot of lies in his head that we were not connected if we could not laugh together. I honestly was so overwhelmed at the time in our lives, I had not even realized that I didn't even laugh anymore. My joy was gone, and I was even unaware. And that is a dark place to be. But what Andy cared about was how I made him feel, and I was too overwhelmed to even notice him. It was an eye-opening for us both. We had lost our joy because both of our expectations of each other were self-seeking or pleasing self, and we never got what we wanted. So my frustration turned into anger, his disappointment turned into anger, and we both began to resent each other and punish each other for not meeting our needs. Nowhere in the Bible does it say you have to laugh together to love one another like Christ loves the church. But out of respect for my husband, I wanted to laugh with him. So by the grace of God, we found our joy again through seeking God instead of our own desires. And this change was not overnight or in one counseling session. Let me remind you, change is often a process, not an event.
So lastly, how do we manage unmet expectations? So I want to talk about three key problems. And those three really are, that we want to talk about tonight, are expectations can be unaware, unreasonable, and unspoken. So first, you can be unaware of the expectations you have in your relationship. Communing with God and praying Psalm 139, 23, and 24 is really powerful. That verse says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Point out anything in me that offends you." So I encourage you to write that verse down and pray it out loud and ask God, and he will point it out. This really is a life-changing prayer. Please remember, we want God to point out these things to lead us to peace, not shame or guilt or condemnation, because God is for us. And this is why taking captive of our thoughts is so important, so that we are not left unaware. What are you meditating on? What are you telling yourself you need, you want, you desire, you have to have in order to be happy? Watch out for this. One of the first things Brooke does in biblical counseling sessions is she has the counselee keep a journal of their thoughts. It's very revealing, and there's often a pattern of expectation that they aren't even aware of. Secondly, your expectations can be unreasonable. When you place expectations on your spouse, it's like putting chains around their neck. Some examples of unreasonable expectations are your spouse needs to respond to situations the same as you, or your spouse needs to be perfect, or your spouse should never have a disagreement, or your spouse should never disappoint you, or your spouse should be able to read your mind. Thirdly, even if your expectations for your spouse are reasonable, they are oftentimes unspoken. They're walking around with chains on and are oblivious to them. These expectations may be clear in your mind, but not in your spouse's mind, because you haven't communicated them. On Bible.org, they suggest that 80% of our expectations are assumed. How often do we think that he or she should just know what I expect by now? Or if he or she really loved me, they would know and I wouldn't have to tell them. So we're just weighing each other down, expecting your spouse to read your mind. They are carrying around the weight of those expectations, and these expectations can't be met by your spouse because they don't even know about them. Then your anger and punishment comes out when they aren't met. Think about getting on that plane in Italy and you never told the pilot that you wanted to go to Italy. You just wanted the pilot to know without you telling him where to take you. And then you get angry when you arrive in Holland. So a few ways to better manage our expectations are to be aware, to be reasonable, and to be clear. If you want to write those down, we'll discuss each one. So the first one, to be aware of what you expect. Again, identify your expectations. The first question is, where does this expectation come from? What is the source of this expectation, as we talked about earlier? And next time you find yourself frustrated at yourself or your spouse, is there an expectation that has not been met? Identify that expectation. Stop and ask God, as I said earlier. Be reasonable in what you expect. Not only should you ask yourself if your expectation is reasonable, but also know that you might have to be flexible. Not every expectation of ours can be met. There has to be grace, as God gives us an abundant amount of grace each and every moment. And thirdly, be clear about what you expect. Communication is very important and effective. Once we identify the expectation, we need to communicate that clearly and let them know what we expect to happen. We can't expect our spouse to read our minds. And you may communicate your expectation and your spouse chooses not to meet it still. But it's important to communicate in a biblical way when those expectations aren't met, instead of punishing them by invalidating them, withdrawing, or escalating, or negatively interpreting the situation. We can still point our spouse toward Christ in a loving way. Even when these expectations are not met, we don't have to punish them. Ephesians 4:25-32 instructs us to speak truth, settle your differences quickly, and speak constructively. If your expectations are biblical and your spouse continues to live in sin, and you have lovingly pointed out to him or her the sin and clearly communicated godly expectations, then please seek biblical counsel. Again, many of our expectations are reasonable and godly, and how we respond to those to be biblical and God-honoring if they aren't met. Ephesians 4 tells us not to sin by letting anger gain control over you. If you need help, please let one of our re-engage leaders know tonight.
So going forward, remember these three things. 1, recognize that you are the biggest source of your spouse's unmet expectation. So you are the biggest source of your spouse's unmet expectations, and identify them. Write your expectations down, make a list. You want to be aware of these before the moment comes when they are not met. So be on guard. It is very easy to please our flesh and act in accordance to our emotions when we let our guard down. Secondly, talk through these expectations. Oftentimes, there isn't sin involved as much as there's just a difference in expectations. Not right or wrong, just different. Communication is key. If you experience anger, sadness, disappointment, frustration, stop. Remember, the feeling does not control you. That feeling is a temperature gauge to let you know, okay, something's not right. Ask God, what expectation in me is not met at this moment? This is prayer. And allow time for the Holy Spirit to answer. And ask yourself, am I willing to sin to get what I want? And then clearly communicate this to your spouse in a way that points your spouse to Christ. Don't expect yourself or your spouse to be perfect in this. Help each other please God and not please your sinful flesh. We will never arrive at not having expectations and conflict that we will not need to communicate with each other. So talking through your expectations will be from here on out in your marriage. Thirdly, your spouse will disappoint you. God won't. A lot of times our unmet expectations bother us because we are not fully satisfied with God. We are looking for our spouse to give us peace or satisfy our soul. So we expect what we think will satisfy us, make us happy, is our spouse meeting our wants. And forget God is the only thing that will ever satisfy and give us that lasting peace we really want. So in closing, let's start expecting the promises of God. So get in his word and know what to expect from God himself. Expect this. When God says, I am with you always to the end of the age in Matthew 28:20, claim this. When you feel lonely in your marriage, claim it. Say it out loud. I am with you always to the end of the age. My God will supply every need of yours according to his riches in the glory in Christ Jesus. Philippians 4:19. If you believe this, truly believe God will supply every need, you won't have to punish your spouse. I'm going to say it again. If you believe that God will supply every need, you won't need to punish your spouse. What if we truly expected God to supply every need? How would your life look different? Expect that He is for you, not against you. Expect that He will strengthen you, help you, uphold you. And how would your mundane moments look different if you expected His promises over your life? So I challenge you to get in His Word. Memorize just a couple of His promises. Meditate on His promises to yourself throughout the day. Most of the time, we're thinking and meditating on the things we think we should have. His promises are what we expect and live by. Do you truly believe His promises? Do you know His promises? That's the question. It's Isaiah 41:10. Fear not, for I, and this is God talking, I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous hand. We cannot fathom His love and grace for us. Who are we not to give that same grace, that undeserving love away to our spouse when they do not live up to our expectations? Giving grace does not give your spouse permission to sin. But when our confidence is in Christ and every promise that is rooted in Christ, our expectations change, our actions change, our emotions change, our thinking changes, our belief system changes, our relationship with our Creator changes. And in return, your circumstances may not change, but oh, how your spirit does. And the chains around your neck are taken off. And that attracts people. And that attracts your spouse to the gospel. Isn't that the purpose of marriage? To point our spouse to Christ, to win over our spouse, to win him over, her over for the gospel of Jesus Christ.
So I pray as we go forward, we recognize our own expectations, we communicate them with our spouses, and we point each other to Christ. Thank you, guys.
Hey, let's give them a round of applause. Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks, Brooke and Andy. Man, I remember, so Brooke and Andy and a couple other couples, some of our leaders went through this material, gosh, back last fall, right? And this was the chapter that kicked my butt the most. I'll be honest, because I realized how I don't share my expectations with Karen near enough, and then why doesn't she understand? Like, she should be able to figure that out, right? And so I'll be honest, I think this is a game changer for your relationship. If we can learn to get this right, and just my own self as I'm going through this tonight, watching you guys share and looking at all the teaching on expectation, like there's several things I'm like, oh yeah, right, I'm supposed to do, oh yeah. And so I'm excited that we got to hear this talk from you guys. Thank you for teaching. I know personally for you guys, it's been that thing too, right? That your marriage has improved as you guys alluded to it in your talk.
Right.
You've gotten better at sharing expectations and not holding wrongful ones against each other, and looking at what does the Bible say about things. So thank you for sharing that with us tonight.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Love when you guys teach. You always do a great job of it. And I hope for each of you that there was something you took away from it, that for your own marriage you can take and apply immediately and start seeing God work through in your marriage as He works through you in that. I am guilty of being overly disappointed when expectations don't line up the way they're supposed to. I'll be honest, full transparency, today for me was just a day, because I walk into the office and we're still here. We're still in the midst of the COVID thing. We're still in the midst of not being able to fully, like, I want this to happen at the church on Monday nights again. And we're not any closer than we were last week. And that's disappointing to me. And right? But I've had to sit all day with, are my expectations based on what Heath wants? Or am I going to, as you guys were talking about Holland, am I going to look around and go, man, how great are the things that are happening right now? We were talking about that in our leaders meeting, that we could complain a lot about not being face-to-face, but dang, there's a whole lot of good stuff happening in Reengage.
Mhm.
I know a lot of you guys are experiencing that. And so I just think your talk was extremely pertinent to the time in which we are. So thanks again.